short, but this is short. My brother-in-law used to MC the Young Men of God conference when it was up in Sydney, and I don't know if any of you know Tom Zinkel, but he's very cheeky. Who knows Tom? Yeah, well, he would introduce me and he'd be like, oh, Karen, would you stand up? And he'd be like, oh, you already are. It's very rude. So anyway, this makes me actually feel very tall this morning, so that's great. And you're all on a slope, so I'm loving it. It is fabulous to be here with you today. Jonathan and I have a very special place in our heart for the Young Men of God movement. I think Jonathan may have spoken at the first conference. Father Ken, what year was the first conference?
I've forgotten.
Oh, come on. 2004 or 6, something like that. So Jonathan gave a keynote. A couple of years later, they asked us both to give a relationships workshop. And then a year later, one of the organisers rang me and he said, look, we really loved your talk, but we'd love you to come and speak to all of the men. Back then, I was a little overwhelmed. I'm like, what on earth do I have to say to a group of guys? And he said, well, could you talk about some of that women folk stuff? And I said, well, there's a lot under the banner of women folk stuff, so you might need to be a little bit more specific. And he got very excited. He said, okay, let's talk about the key to unlocking a woman's heart. And I said, I don't want to be disrespectful, but you're a little deluded if you think there's only one key. And then when you found that one key, it's going to be the same key next week, next month, next year. But he settled on the keys to unlocking a woman's heart. And then that began a journey with the Young Men of God movement over a few years of me coming to share some insights into understanding women. So I want you to turn to the person on your left and say, are you ready? And turn to the person on your right. To understand the heart of a woman. Oh. I take it the laughter is an indication that perhaps you don't think it's possible to understand the heart of a woman. Put your hand up if you can relate to this sentence. A woman's heart is like a swamp. You don't know where to stand, and sooner or later you just know you're going to get caught in quicksand. Okay, your wives aren't in the room, so you can be honest. It's in the vault. So honesty. Who finds it difficult to understand women? Hands up. All right. Well, you're in good company this morning. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the differences that exist between men and women and some insights to help you on your journey. Because we live in a culture that would like to deny all of the differences. You're living in a moment in history that seeks to erase the differences between men and women. And you and I both know there is an ontological difference between us, right in the very cells of our body. From the cells to how we communicate, to how we deal with conflict, we are different. And those differences have been intentionally placed within us by the Creator himself. It's the way he fashioned us for a purpose. And unless we understand that purpose, then we are going to run into problems in our relationships. Because so often we see the differences as the problem. And I'd like to offer you a few reframes in how you think this morning. In Catholic mindset coaching, we talk about the model, that if we're helping people with their mindset, we pass things through this model. And I'll give you a couple of letters. It's TFAR. TFAR. So this is a little quick snapshot. Thoughts, feelings, actions, results. And so we often get caught in our feelings in life. So you might feel frustrated with whether it's your sister or your wife or your girlfriend or someone that you're working with. You have this strong feeling which causes you to behave in a certain way, which drives the results you're getting in your life. But often we forget what precedes those feelings are our thoughts. And when the Bible talks about taking every thought captive and making it obedient to Christ, we have to become better students of our interior life and learn how to pass our thoughts through the gifts of reason. God has given us an intellect and a will so we can think about our thinking. And so the reframe I want to give you in how you think about this topic today is around this. I believe that it's not so much the differences that are the problem in our relationships as it is our perception of those differences. So we have this saying when we used to do school seminars that fish discover water last. Fish are swimming in water, they're so surrounded by all this water, they're not very smart anyway, but they don't step back and say, what's the impact of all this water on me? They just passively go along absorbing all of the water. We're a lot like that in the culture that we live in today. And unless you, as young men of God, stand back and start to critically think about the messages you're passively absorbing, you will absorb those messages. And we know that what we see, what we think about affects us, it shapes our attitudes, and our attitudes ultimately determine our behaviour. So I really want to encourage you to have a few reframes of how you think about this morning. So what we need before we dive into this is to really look at God's plan. And I want to give you this overarching vision to aspire to. Obviously, we're not perfect, all of us fall short. But through Christ, he has given us the grace and he's given us the ability to try and work towards this beautiful vision that God has for man and woman. So what I'd like to do is give you 3 words. They say that you only ever remember 10% of what a speaker says, which is a little depressing because, you know, a lot goes into preparing talks, but we'll give you a few 10% moments. And I want to give you 3 words that I'm going to give you 3 desires of a woman's heart today. That's in the practical section. But right now, in this overarching vision, I'm going to give you 3 words. So if I come back next year and I test you, you need to remember these 3 words, okay? So are we paying attention? Yes. You're asleep. Are you awake? Come on, who's snoring? All right. These 3 words are gift, helpmate, and alongside. Gift, helpmate, and alongside. And we're going to anchor this morning's session in these 3 words because these words form the overarching vision of God's plan for us as man and woman. So in the book of Matthew, Jesus is approached by the Pharisees about the question of divorce. And they're trying to trick him and they're trying to, manipulate him to get a certain response. And he speaks into this experience of divorce. And he says, in the beginning, this was not so. This was not my Father's plan. It was never my Father's plan that man and woman would be pitted against one another in a relationship of competition, domination, manipulation, control. This was not my Father's plan. He said, in the beginning, this was not so. And if we want to know how to have healthy relationships with each other and understand each other, then we have to go back to the beginning. The Creator's master plan for us. And if we can focus that and set that as our guiding star, then that is what we can work towards while the culture goes to rubbish around us. So this first word is gift. God created the whole world, the human body, intentionally, beautifully designed to be a gift. And we know the story in Scripture, in the book of Genesis, that he said it's not good for the man to be alone. And he creates the woman and then he presents the woman to the man to be a gift. And he presents the man to the woman to be a gift as well. And it is this concept of gift that has to underpin our mindset and how we approach our relationships with one another. So often we see people are in a relationship for what they can get rather than what they can give. And John Paul II said, you'll never find the fulfillment, the joy, the purpose, the happiness that you seek unless you seek to make a gift of yourself in love for another. And so that is God's plan for us, that we seek to make a gift of ourselves in love. And I really encourage you to grow in that virtue, grow in the habit of cultivating that virtue in your life. If you're single, you can do that in your family, with your sisters, with your mum, with your friends. If you're married, you have a girlfriend. And for the men who are living consecrated life, the priests and brothers, I said this in my seminar yesterday, some of the most important people in our journey, Jonathan and my journey, have been the MGL priests who have walked with us through different seasons, our discernment for marriage, but then all the seasons that we've had over 25 years. And if you're a brother here today, please apply your ear to this wisdom, because the power of a good priest in the lives of people is profound. Jonathan and I were just talking about this on the way out. A good priest is a doctor of the soul. So learn these principles so you can walk alongside people. So number 1, created to be a gift. Number 2, helpmate. As I said, we read in Scripture that God created this beautiful world, the sky, the seas, the nature, the creatures. He created man. And he looked at the man and he thought, gosh, he should be happy. But he actually recognised that he was incomplete. And he said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. And the women asked me to clarify that helpmate does not mean domestic goddess and slave and one who picks up after you. The word helpmate translated actually is about not a practical help, but it is a spiritual help. And this word helpmate means divine aid. And man and woman, right from the beginning, are called to be one another's divine aid. That it is in relationship with each other that you discover your essence of what it means to be human, what it means to be male or female, created in God's image and likeness. John Paul II has a beautiful quote where he says, he, the man, realises his essence only by existing with somebody, and even more deeply by existing for somebody. The man recognised and found his humanity with the help of the woman, and vice versa. So we discover our essence by being in relationship with one another. So those differences that we think might be the problem, perhaps they're not actually a problem. And then finally, so gift, helpmate, and coming alongside. That right from the beginning, when God presents the man and woman to one another, they are called to come alongside one another as friend, helpmate, and complementary partner. And the church uses this word complementarity when talking about the differences between men and women. That we're not meant to compete with each other, we're meant to come alongside and complement one another. But in the work that we do, I see a lot of problems happen when people don't know how to do the coming alongside. I often say there's the spiritual, theological formation that we receive through church, and sometimes, and historically perhaps the church has failed in presenting the human formation, those really practical skills that we need to do life well and to do relationships well. A number of years ago, after one of the men's conferences that I spoke at, I would often actually get emails for wives. So after I'd been speaking at these conferences for a while, the wives were like, "Oh, Young Men of God conference is coming around," and they'd email me, "Could you weave these points into your talk? My husband's coming." So anyway, it was very, very smart. But anyway, after the conference, I'd often get emails from the wives and certain men, but this one email really stood out for me, and I often share it with this woman's permission because it really summed up what I'm trying to say today. And this is her email. She said, "My husband attended the Young Men of God conference a month ago, and he's come back a changed man. She said, our marriage has been struggling for some time, and recently I resigned myself to the fact that I just had to endure this marriage for the sake of our children. But God works in mysterious ways. My husband came home, he walked through the door, he got down on both knees, not just one, there you go, and he asked for my forgiveness for the times in which he has not loved me as I needed or I wanted to be loved." And this is what he said to her, and this was really beautiful. He said that it's not that I don't love you, it's that I don't know how. And I thought, how true for so many of us that we often miss the mark when it comes to loving one another in life, but particularly in intimate relationships. St. John of the Cross said, at the end of our days, you will not be judged by what car you drive, how much money you've got, how many degrees you've got, how great your body is, or what you've achieved in life. He said, there is only one thing you will be judged on at the end of your life, and that is how well you have loved. So I really want to encourage you, I spoke about this in the seminar yesterday, to start to look at the virtues. I joked about this years ago, saying it's not like you're down at the pub Friday night and you say to your mate, how are you growing in the virtues this week? It's not really the language that we use or conversations that we have. But I think that it should. I think the virtues and that language of virtue should become a part of your everyday conversations within this brotherhood, really encouraging one another to grow in virtue. So God's overarching plan is that we're gift, helpmate, complementary partner, called to come alongside one another in life. And so I want to give you this reframe now and ask you, do you actually think the differences are the problem? Or is it that we have been conditioned to see the differences as a problem in order to keep us divided? Because you need to understand that we are all living in a spiritual battle for our souls. But I truly believe at this moment in history, the enemy has his bullseye right at the heart of human sexuality and what it means to be a human person created in God's image and likeness. Part of my work at the moment is doing a lot of consulting to Catholic education systems on the Christian vision for the human person and really trying to help them in schools how we can be teaching this to our young people. And I have seen things that would just blow you away in terms of some of the ideologies and the agendas that are going on. And I do believe that there is a battle over particularly what it means to be male and female at this moment. And so we have to understand that being created in God's image and likeness means that we are Christ bearers. We bear the image of Christ and the image of God. But man and woman, image God most profoundly in that intimate union of marriage. And you know, they say that marital love is an icon, it's a sign and symbol, and Christ elevated it to the level of sacrament because a sacrament makes visible the invisible mystery of God. And that relationship of three persons in one in the Trinity, that giving and receiving of love, is what is meant to be imaged within marriage. And so you can see how the enemy's working by pitting man and woman against each other in this perception of difference in order to keep us divided. But what if instead of these differences being an obstacle to fulfillment and peace, instead of being an obstacle, what if they're actually an invitation? What if those differences are actually inviting you to discover your essence? What if those differences are actually inviting you to make a gift of yourself in love to another, to draw you beyond yourself, to understand another, and then to lay your life down for them? So I think they're really important reframes as we go into this next section. So John Paul II has another beautiful quote, which I absolutely love. He says, "At every moment of history, for its poise and its balance, life depends on who she will be for him and on who he will be for her." And so I want to ask you this morning, who have you been, who are you, and who will you be for the women that you are called to do life with? Not just romantically, but in all areas of life. Who have you been and who will you be for the women in your life? Because everything depends on that. So now we're going to get into the fun stuff, where I would love to share with you some insights into understanding women. And what I'm going to do is frame these within 3 core desires of a woman's heart. And these 3 core desires are taken from the book Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. Has anyone read that book? Okay, well, Jonathan loves that book simply because it's what turned my heart to say, yes, you can get a motorbike. So I was a registered nurse. My background was oncology, palliative care, but I'd worked for 9 months in a major trauma hospital in ICU in Sydney. And so we had a run of young men, just motorbike accidents, brain injuries. It was horrific. So I was like, you're never having a motorbike, ever, ever, ever. But it took away the fact that my husband, Jonathan, loves adventure, and he'd been riding bikes for years. And we were living up in Cairns, and he wanted to get a motorbike and take me on the adventure, for goodness sake, all the way up to Port Douglas every Saturday. And I was like, we're never doing that. Anyway, I read Wild at Heart, and it gave me a different perspective on that desire for adventure that Jonathan had. So it's a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to do that. He talks about the 3 desires of a man's heart, and that's what he works through in that book. But he also gives the complementary desires of a woman's heart, and he works through how these 2 desires complement each other. So I'm going to add my content to those 3 desires today. And those 3 desires are that a woman longs to be caught up in an adventure, she longs to be a beauty who is chosen and cherished, and she longs to be fought for. So she longs to be caught up in an adventure, she longs to be chosen and to be found beautiful, and she longs to be fought for. Now, you know, the feminists will hate this talk because they'll be like, no, they don't, there's no differences. But anyway, we'll just keep this under lock and seal so I don't get any hate mail. All right, so number 1, she longs to be caught up in an adventure. Now, here's the important point. She longs to be caught up in the adventure, but she does not want to be your adventure. So we live in a culture, a hookup culture, where so many men are using women to initiate themselves into manhood. But a woman does not want to be your adventure. She does not want to be used. She wants to be invited into something greater than herself. And you can't invite a woman into something unless you've done the work on yourself first, because you have nothing to offer her. And that's why, I mean, with our kids, we always had this rule of no dating in high school, and they never understood it. And I said, it's because in those years, your identity is really being forged. And you have to come to a place of really knowing who you are before you're entering into relationship. So there's 3 questions that you have to ask yourself, and you must ask and answer them in this order. And we find today that so many people are starting with the last question and then trying to go back to answer the first question, and they're messing it up terribly. So who am I is the first question you must ask. Where am I going? And who will travel with me? Who am I? Where am I going? And who will travel with me? And you must ask that question of who I am in this sense of original solitude. John Paul II talks about this in Theology of the Body. We must come to a place of knowing who we are. Obviously, our whole lives are a journey of discovering who we are. I mean, Jonathan and I won't tell you my age, but, you know, we're 50, over 50 now, and so we're still learning who we are. We're still growing to a sense of identity. So you never fully arrive. But you do, those years, I say in adolescence when we're talking to young people, they are the years in which you're forging your identity. Very important. The tribes in Africa understand this because they take their men, when they hit 13 years of age, they take them into the wilderness where they have to do battle against themselves and the elements. They have to discover what's inside them, discover their inner strength, face their fears, and then they return to the community and they're considered men. So often the work that men have to do has to take them away from the company of women. But I always like to add that if you're married and you haven't done your work, it doesn't mean you leave your wife. You have to work out how you're going to do that with her. But so many men use women and do women a lot of damage when they go to them to get a sense of their identity. So knowing who you are, where you are going. Now this is very important, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Research says that women are not looking for good looks, lots of money, athletic bodies, whatever it is. And some of you are like, oh, that's such a relief. No, you're all very good-looking men in this room. All very good-looking. But the number one thing that women are looking for in men is a sense of mission and purpose. And I think we have a crisis in masculinity today, and I think, you know, the culture's done you a disservice in many ways because men don't know who they are, they don't know where they're going, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. But women find it incredibly attractive when men have a sense of purpose. Not that they have it all figured out, but that they're going somewhere. They're not gaming till 3 a.m. They're not sitting on porn all night or drinking or being really immature and juvenile and dressing, you know, like they were like 13 still when they're meant to be 30. So women want a man who has a sense of mission, who knows what he's about. And then the final question is, who will travel with me? When you know who you are, if you have a sense of purpose, then you're in a position to invite a woman on your journey with you. I shared this yesterday. Jonathan chased me for 3 years and I wouldn't go out with him, and it's a bit of a joke, and we say that there's a fine line between persevering and stalking, and we always say he stayed on the persevering side of the line. But Father Dave, who's here today, he's funny, he used to walk up and down the lake listening to Jonathan speak about this girl that he liked, and then Father Dave never let on that I would then walk with Father Dave talking about this guy that I liked. You're very good, Father Dave. And I think Jonathan might have said to you, I just don't understand why she won't go out with me. Like, he was really shocked. And I think I recall this correctly. Father Dave said something along the lines of, she's waiting to see which way you'll go. And it was very true. I had been raised in a great home. I knew my value, and I was just waiting to see. Jonathan had come to a conversion later, sort of in his 20s, and I was waiting to see which way he would go. So true. And so Jonathan went away, he did his work, and then when he came back to me, he had something to offer and invite me into, and it's been a 25-year adventure ever since. So she longs to be caught up in an adventure, but she does not want to be your adventure. You need to do your work before you're entering into a relationship with women. The second desire is she longs to be found beautiful, to be found to be chosen. Now, we all want to be seen, known and loved, and our deepest desire is for love, but this shows up a little bit differently for man and for woman. And we both have a deep fear that ultimately is about not being loved, but it manifests differently. So for men, that fear is not being strong enough, not having what it takes. For women, the equivalent fear is to not be found beautiful, not to be chosen, not to be cherished. And this, you just have to look at little girls. Like, we have 2 daughters and a son in the middle. I often say to him, you are being forged in the fire. You're going to make a very good husband one day, pillared by 2 sisters. But we have 2 beautiful daughters, and I just remember when they were little, they would put their dresses on and they'd spin around and they'd want to captivate Jonathan. They weren't trying to captivate my attention, but they'd spin and look at Jonathan as their dad, like, do you affirm my beauty? Do I captivate you? And it's the same for all women. I remember an 80-year-old woman, and there was this beautiful young man who picked her up and took her to this dance, and she got all dressed up, and her heart came alive because she was being chosen. So it doesn't end from, when a girl is born to when she dies, there's that desire to be chosen, to be found beautiful. Not just beautiful as a body, but is she captivating in the depths of her soul as a person? That's the kind of beauty that we're talking about. Woman is the pinnacle of creation. We often say that God perfected his workmanship in the woman, so, you're all pretty awesome too. But there's something about the woman being the final thing that God created. And Christopher West often talks about, if you want to look at that which is most sacred, look at that which is most defiled in our culture. And the thing that is most defiled is the female body and human sexuality. And we can't talk about a woman's deep desire to be chosen, to be found beautiful, without talking about the impact that pornography has on the heart of a woman when the man that she's in a relationship chooses to affirm the beauty of another woman. And leading sisterhood for so many years, I share this with you because one of the preeminent pastoral issues that I would walk with women in is men, husbands, boyfriends and sons who had an issue with pornography. And one woman whose husband had many affairs, in excess of 100 affairs. I'm like, when do you stop counting? But, so many affairs, men who had destroyed their businesses because of this addiction. And Jonathan and I have done a lot of work on this over the years, but I really want to speak into the experience of what it's like for a woman when this happens, because I have walked pastorally with, I think there was one year I had 15 women I was walking with, and they're just so broken. And there's not a very good understanding of the impact that this has, and by priests as well. A lot of priests misinforming women about what they should be doing to help their husbands in this role. But what happens to a woman when she sees the eyes of her husband or her boyfriend affirming the beauty of another woman in pornography is that she ceases to feel special. She feels that she is not good enough. I had one woman say, if I was more beautiful, he would have stayed. And it actually has nothing to do with the beauty of the woman, but the sin in the heart and that addiction. Pornography is incredibly addictive, and I'm sure it's been addressed at some point in this conference. But I'll share a couple of quotes with you. John Paul II said, it's not that pornography shows too much, but it actually shows too little of the human person. A grandfather said to his grandson, son, never look at it because it will ruin your imagination. And I just really want to encourage you, you have a duty and a responsibility that if this is an issue in your life, then you must bring it to the light. You must talk to the priests and you must get wise counsel, people to walk with you, because I often say, don't think if pornography is an issue in your single years that it will stop when you get married, because I've walked with the women and I've picked up the pieces in their lives, because this often doesn't happen. So I just want to say, bring that to the light, get wise counsel, and learn how to cherish the women in your life, because they have this deep desire to be found beautiful. It was funny, actually, we were at breakfast this morning and I walked off and Jonathan grabbed my hand and he goes, "Oh, you're so beautiful." And I was like, "Oh." It's like, even after 25 years married, I said, "You're right, my talk's actually right, Jonathan. It's true." All right, so she longs to be caught up in adventure. She longs to have her beauty affirmed, to be captivating, and she longs to be fought for. That's the third desire of her heart. And I'd like to give you 3 ideas on how you can fight for a woman's heart. I think so many men want the beauty without the battle. They want, the relationship, they like the idea, but they're not actually prepared to do the hard work. So years ago, I surveyed women. I said, what are your top 5 things that you would like men to know about you? And we've settled on 3 today. So I'm going to give you these 3 insights. The first one is communication. That a woman longs to be listened to, not just heard. Remember when we couldn't have kids for 6 years, and then we had 3 kids in 3 years. We said to the Sisters of Life, please stop praying now for just a little while. And anyway, I had 3 little kids at home, and Jonathan was speaking all the time, and he came home, and I'm like talking. He's like, oh my gosh, make it stop. It's like a machine gun. Like, I was just talking so much at him. And we had to learn early in those days, I had to learn about letting him get in the door, because I think, women have to learn certain things too about how men operate. And then he had to really learn to sit and to listen, and Jonathan's actually a fantastic listener. But women long to be listened to and not just heard. Women like to talk. I think they use 15,000 words a day, and men use something like 7,000. There's a big difference between how much we like to talk. But poor communication is often at the heart of a loss of relationship and that instability in relationship. So men and women communicate with different aims. Men communicate to build rapport. Women communicate to build relationship. Often when men are listening to women, they're sort of sifting through all the feelings and the stuff they're talking about to get to the facts so they can help solve the problem. And I remember, again, I was talking to Jonathan once, he goes, well, just give me the facts. And I said, well, the facts aren't the feeling, at the point. It's how I feel about the facts that's the point. He's like, I don't quite understand. But we've got to sift through, when you're listening to women, sifting through the facts and trying to listen to the feelings. What's she actually trying to communicate? And sometimes a key insight is to ask her, are you wanting my help to solve this problem, or do you just want me to listen? And that opens a woman's heart. So a huge one is just attention, giving undivided attention. And our phones are just weapons of mass distraction. And I mean, you go to restaurants all the time. You see families and kids just on their phones all the time. Couples out on a date on their phone. I'm like, why did you even bother coming out? But learning to talk, learning the art of conversation. I actually think this is an art we've lost in this day and age. Everyone's scrolling. I mean, even at the dinner table, have you seen this funny reel? It's like, learn the art of communing with other people. We're made for communion and union with one another. And so learn how to have conversations. Learn how to ask questions that really plough the heart, the soil of the heart, even with one another, not just with women. Often in conflict, this is another area, men withdraw or they do the silent treatment. And women hate this. They really often want to talk to work through the issue. Men often feel like that's nagging and that they're going to be criticised, so they avoid. But if you can try and listen to the complaint under the criticism, that's a really valuable key in your relationships. So communication is the top need that women sort of express that they'd like men to understand. The second one is around romance. Who's romantic? Any romantic bones in this room? Oh, lovely. Well, this ties into a woman's deep need to be chosen. But what shocks so many women when they get married is how fleeting the romance was. And James Dobson did a survey of women many years ago, and he said the number one cause of depression for young wives was a lack of romantic love within marriage. So many men think the battle is actually asking a woman out on a date. And I often say to men that, if you think that's biggest battle, then you've got another thing coming. Like the fight for a woman's heart actually begins the day after you say I do. And if you give up and you think that you've wed her and you've won, then you're going to run into problems. So learning how to cultivate this feeling of love and an atmosphere of romance is really important for women. There's that saying that says, you know, you can tell the success of a man by the smile on his wife's face. So, if you want to smile, happy wife, happy life, that sort of thing. There's some truth in it. A woman who is loved, who feels cherished, is alive. But a woman whose husband has withdrawn into silence through whatever reasons, he's battling his own demons, whatever it is, you can tell because something inside, the light goes out inside of her. And so if you're married in this room, it's never too late to start. It's never too late to go home, like that email I shared with you, and start investing. Asking your wife, what is it that means something to you? Like, what means something to you? How do you feel cherished? Starting to have some of those conversations. I guarantee you, if you have that conversation with your wife, you will just open her heart. She'll do anything for you. So it's very, very important. The major cause of divorce is in relationships where men do not know how to show love. So actions speak louder than words, and it's the small things done consistently that make the difference. It's often not the grand gestures, but the small things done regularly. So communication, romance, and the final one is affection. And this leads to this one, that the emotions that women feel when they romance, this is going to sound shocking, has nothing to do with sex. And a lot of guys go, well, what's the point? But the feelings that a woman feels when she's romanced have to do with safety and security and feeling like she can depend on you. And obviously that leads to intimacy later in life, in marriage. There can never be enough affection. Hugging without the intention of sexual intimacy is really important. And John Paul II, in his book Love and Responsibility, really encourages young men who are discerning marriage, engaged even within marriage, to really understand those differences between male and female sexuality, especially going into marriage and walking with a good spiritual director in that area. So there's some very practical insights. I want to list a couple of books and resources that you can go away and read. There's a book that's called For Men Only, and it gives you some very valuable insights into women. There's another book called Love and Respect, and the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. So they're my top 3 books that I really recommend to people navigating relationships. So I just want to do a full circle now and come back to this point that I made at the start about our differences. And really having that mindset shift that the differences are not so much the obstacle, but they are an invitation. And an invitation to help you grow in holiness and self-gift and self-service of another. And the theme of your conference is around this word of power. And God wants to give you that power to love the women in your life and to walk alongside them. And I love the quote of St. Augustine where he says, "He who created you without your cooperation, he will not save you without your cooperation." So if you're sitting around waiting for God to change certain areas in your life or make something happen, he actually needs you to get in the arena and to make some choices as well and to cooperate with that grace. I just want to finish with this, that don't ever forget that, that you are in a battle and you need to recognise the moment in history that you are in. There is a battle for your sexuality, for your masculinity. And I just want to say to you on behalf of women that we really affirm, appreciate and need you as men. I don't think men get told that often enough, but we really do. And it is only in and through the power of Jesus Christ that you will be able to be the be the man that the women, don't be a woman. That's like totally not what we want. It is only in and through Jesus Christ that you'll be able to be the man that the women in your life need. So God bless you all and thank you very much.